Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. We're not sailing off to sea and nobody's dying of the plague. Instead, we're holding up a gentle mirror to your perfectly ordinary Tuesday and watching a woman from 200 years ago faint clean off her velvet chair at the sight of it. Because tonight belongs to the Regency lady, that pale, corseted, endlessly supervised creature of drawing rooms and dance cards, and we are going to show her your life, your genes, your job, your baffling habit of leaving the house without first asking a single male relative for written permission. She may not survive the first 5 minutes, and that is rather the point. Before we begin, a sincere thank you to whoever dropped this idea into the comments, because honestly, the best topics always come from you. And this channel only grows because people keep handing me these wonderfully strange little questions to fall asleep to. If you enjoy this sort of thing, and only if you genuinely do, feel free to like the video and subscribe, no pressure at all. We're also now on Spotify if you'd rather drift off with just your ears, so check the link in the description. And if you ever want the extra long ad-free version, the members get a standalone 8-hour edition with nothing to interrupt the calm. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft background hum, tuck yourself in, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's pause for a moment and wonder a few things. Would a Regency lady understand the concept of a career, or would she assume you'd been sent to work as punishment? Could she survive watching you swipe through strangers on a glowing rectangle at 11 at night? What would she make of you sweating on purpose in tight clothing for fun? Would she faint at your bank account, your bare ankles, or the sheer scandal of you laughing loudly in a public restaurant alone, with nobody there to disapprove? Congratulations, you've just woken up in your own bed in the 21st century exactly as you are. Nothing about you has changed, but sometime in the night, a Regency lady from 1813 has been quietly deposited in the corner of your bedroom, clutching a small bottle of smelling salts, and she's been watching you sleep in an enormous soft bed all by yourself. She has questions, she has objections. She has, frankly, already begun drafting a strongly worded letter. Let's begin. Let's start with the crime scene itself. Your bed. You're sprawled diagonally across a mattress big enough for 3 people, no husband in sight, no chaperone stationed by the door, no maid sleeping on the floor beside you to guarantee your virtue survive the night. To the Regency lady, this is astonishing. A gentleman of her time rarely slept in true privacy, and an unmarried one was watched like a crown jewel. The idea that you sleep alone, by choice, in a locked room, answerable to no one, is either paradise or the beginning of ruin, and she genuinely cannot tell which. Let her look closer at the bed itself because it keeps getting worse for her nerves. The mattress is soft the whole way through. No lumps, no straw, no horsehair working its way loose to jab you in the spine at 3 in the morning. In her world, even a fine bed was a layered negotiation of feathers and matting, and the truly comfortable ones belong to the very wealthy. You, meanwhile, are lying on something that cost you a few weeks' wages and gives you back support like a devoted servant who never complains. She presses a hand to the mattress, feels it sink, and quietly recalculates everything she thought she knew about comfort. Then there's the sheer square footage of solitude. A Regency household was a crowded, breathing thing, servants in the passages, family through thin walls, someone always within earshot of everyone else. Privacy was not a right. It was a rare and slightly suspicious luxury. You have an entire room that is yours, a door you can close, and a lock you can turn, and you use all 3 without a second thought. To her, a young woman alone behind a locked door is a scandal waiting to be written up. To you, it's Tuesday. And the temperature. Oh, she notices the temperature. Your room is neither freezing nor stifling because a small box on the wall quietly keeps it exactly as you like it, all night, while you sleep through the whole miracle. She spent her cold mornings watching her breath rise toward the ceiling, waiting for a maid to come and coax a fire back to life. You simply exist in perfect climate, unbothered, having never once thought about it. It's like complaining your yacht is the wrong shade of a white. Now watch how you wake. No bell, no servant, no household stirring around you. A small glowing rectangle chimes gently on its own, at a time you chose, and you silence it by touching it and going back to sleep for 9 more minutes, which is a decision so decadent it would make a duchess blush. The Regency lady rose when the house rose, which is to say when other people decided she should. You have appointed yourself the sole authority on when your day begins, and then overruled your own authority twice, purely out of laziness. She sits on the edge of your enormous empty bed, smelling salts in hand, trying to understand a world where a woman sleeps alone, warm, comfortable, undisturbed, and completely in charge of her own mornings. To her, this is the sleeping arrangement of a spoiled queen with a very forgiving kingdom. To you, it's just where you were unconscious for 8 hours before hitting snooze. She'd envy you if she weren't so busy being scandalized. Honestly, she's a little of both. Welcome to the least dangerous, most luxurious thing you do all day, and you did it without waking up. It's time to get dressed, which for you takes roughly 40 seconds and involves no help whatsoever. You pull on soft, stretchy fabric that moves with your body, and you're done. The Regency lady is horrified on 2 counts. First, there is no corset, no stays laced tight to shape your figure into something respectable. Second, there is no one helping you. A proper lady of 1813 often needed a maid simply to get into her clothes, because the fastening sat at the back where no human arm was meant to reach. You dressing yourself, unshaped and unassisted, looks to her like leaving the house half undone. Let her examine the fabric because it defies her expectations completely. It stretches. She pulls at the hem and it springs back unbothered, and she nearly drops it in alarm. In her day, cloth held its shape because you forced it to, through structure and stitching and the quiet suffering of the wearer. The notion of a material that simply moves with the body, forgiving every bend and stride, seems almost like cheating. You bought it for the equivalent of a modest sum, and you owned several, in colours she'd consider far too bold for mourning. Then consider the stays she keeps expecting you to produce. In her world, a gentlewoman's undergarments did real architectural work, holding the torso in an approved silhouette, enforcing the posture of good breeding. To go without was to announce that you had given up on decency entirely. Yet here you are, shaped by nothing but yourself, breathing all the way down into your ribs, bending to tie your shoes in a single fluid motion no corseted woman could manage without assistance and a small prayer. It's like watching someone win a race by removing the weights everyone else agreed to wear. The speed is what truly unsettles her. Dressing, for her, was a ceremony, a slow collaboration between a lady and her maid, involving layers upon layers assembled in a fixed and sacred order. It could eat a genuine chunk of the morning. You've completed the entire ritual in less time than it takes her to locate a hairpin, and you did it while yawning, half asleep, thinking about breakfast. She keeps waiting for the second phase, the real dressing, the part with all the lacing. It never comes. You're already looking for your keys, and the independence of it, that's the quiet scandal underneath. A maid to dress you was not merely convenience, it was a marker of rank, proof that you were a lady rather than a labourer. To dress yourself was, in her mind, faintly beneath a gentlewoman. So watching you do it cheerfully, competently and alone, she can't decide whether you've been abandoned by your household or liberated from it. You would tell her, if she asked, that you simply prefer it. That answer would take her a full minute to absorb. She stands in the corner, clutching her salts, watching a woman get fully dressed, unshaped, unassisted, and unbothered in the time it takes a kettle to whistle. To her, you look thrillingly, dangerously undone, a lady who has skipped every step that made a lady. To you, you're just dressed and running slightly late. The difference between her morning and yours is roughly 2 servants, 4 layers, and one entirely different idea of what a woman's body is allowed to feel like before noon. You feel like yourself. She's not sure she ever got to. Now let's talk about what you're actually wearing on your legs, because this one nearly finishes her off entirely. Trousers. On a woman, in public. In the Regency world, breeches and pantaloons belonged firmly to men, and a woman in them was not making a fashion statement. She was committing something close to a moral offence. Women wore gowns, full stop, ideally flowing muslin that whispered around the ankles. The sight of you striding to the shops in denim, legs clearly separated into 2 distinct tubes of fabric, tells her the entire natural order has quietly collapsed while she slept. Let her circle you slowly, taking in the horror from every angle. The fabric hugs each leg individually, revealing that you have, in fact, 2 of them. A truth that gowns were specifically designed to soften into one graceful, ambiguous column. In her world, the shape of a woman's legs was a private matter, hinted at, never confirmed. You have confirmed it, loudly, in blue, on a public street in daylight while carrying a coffee. She looks around for the crowd that should surely be gathering to gasp, and finds only people equally trousered, going about their day. Consider what trousers meant to her symbolically, because that's where the real offence lives. Breeches were the uniform of men's authority, their freedom to ride, to work, to move through the world unencumbered. There was even a phrase, wearing the breeches, used to mock any household where a woman held too much power. And here you are wearing the breeches, literally, without a trace of shame, and holding, from what she can tell, quite a lot of power. The metaphor and the garment have merged, and she finds the combination almost too pointed to bear. Then there's the sheer practicality of it, which she grudgingly cannot ignore. You stride, you climb stairs 2 at a time, you crouch to pick up something you dropped, all without gathering fistfuls of skirt or calculating how much ankle you're about to reveal. In her voluminous muslin, a gust of wind was a small emergency, and a puddle was a strategic problem. You cross the puddle. You don't even look at it. It's like watching someone walk casually through a doorway you spent your whole life being told was a wall. And the variety undoes her further. You don't own 1 pair of trousers as some daring novelty. You own many, in different weights and colours, for different occasions, and none of them raise a single eyebrow. In her mind, she's still bracing for the scandal, the whispered ruin, the strongly worded letter from a concerned aunt. But there is no scandal. There is no aunt. There is only you, comfortable, mobile, and entirely respectable, dressed in the one garment she was taught would end a woman's reputation on sight. She retreats to the corner, smelling salts uncapped, watching a fully respectable woman walk down a public street in a men's-style clothing while the world declines to end. To her, you're wearing a costume of rebellion so complete it should come with a scandal of its own. To you, you just grabbed the comfortable pair because you had errands. The gap between those 2 experiences is the entire distance from her century to yours, measured in 2 tubes of denim and absolutely no one caring. You wear the breeches now. Everyone does. She's going to need a moment. Speaking of ankles, let's discuss just how much of yourself you display without a second thought. On a warm day, you'll wear shorts or a skirt that stops well above the knee, and you'll do it walking down a busy street in full daylight. To the Regency lady, an exposed ankle was already a small thrill. the sort of glimpse that made gentlemen forget their own names. The idea of a bare calf, a bare knee, an entire sunlit leg on public view is so far beyond her understanding that she assumes you must have been caught in some terrible accident and lost the bottom half of your dress. Let her adjust, slowly, to the geography of what she's seeing. She begins at the ankle, the old frontier, the daring edge of glimpse that a lifted hem might once have offered a lucky gentleman. Then her eyes travel up, past the shin, past the knee, and she has to sit down. In her world, that entire stretch of leg existed only in the realm of the deeply private, spoken of never, seen almost never, imagined constantly. You have simply put it out in the sun, unremarkable, because the weather was pleasant and shorts were the sensible choice. Consider the effort her generation put into concealment. Hems were long by design, petticoats guarded against the treachery of a strong breeze, and the whole architecture of a gown was built to keep the lower body a rumour. A woman managed her skirts constantly, sitting, standing, climbing, a lifelong performance of not revealing herself by accident. You have abolished the entire performance. There is nothing to manage, nothing to guard, nothing to accidentally reveal, because you revealed it on purpose the moment you left the house and then forgot about it entirely. And nobody stops. That's the part her mind snags on. In her imagination, a woman showing this much leg would draw a scandalized crowd, a fainting matron, a gentleman covering a child's eyes. Instead, the busy street simply flows around you, indifferent, other bare legs passing in both directions. The exposure she was raised to see as ruinous has become so ordinary that it isn't even noticed. It's like discovering that the terrible secret you guarded your whole life was, in another country, just the weather. She keeps hunting for the shame that should accompany all this skin, and she cannot find it anywhere on you. You aren't blushing. You aren't hurrying. You aren't pretending it's an accident or apologizing to passers-by. You're comfortable, cool in the heat, and possibly a little proud of how the sun feels on your shins. To her, comfort was never a reason that outranked modesty. To you, the two aren't even in competition. If it's warm, you dress for warm, and your legs are simply part of you, not a scandal you carry around below the waist. So she sits, salts in hand, watching a woman stroll through daylight with an entire leg on cheerful public display, while the world remains stubbornly upright. To her, you're either the victim of a wardrobe catastrophe, or the boldest creature she has ever encountered. To you, you're just a person who checked the forecast and dressed accordingly. The ankle that once stopped a gentleman's heart has become, in your century, the least interesting thing about you, and she isn't sure whether that's a tragedy or the most relaxing idea she's ever heard. Let's follow you outside, where you do something she finds truly unhinged. You lie down in direct sunlight, wearing almost nothing, specifically so your skin will turn darker. For the Regency lady, pale skin was the whole point. A milky complexion meant you were wealthy enough to stay indoors, shaded by parasols and wide bonnets, untouched by the vulgar labour of the fields. Tanned skin marked a woman who worked outside, and no gentlewoman wanted that. Watching you pay money to travel somewhere hot and roast yourself golden, she concludes you're deliberately trying to look poor, which to her is the strangest ambition imaginable. Let her walk through the logic as she understood it, because it was ironclad in her day. The sun was the enemy of status. It browned the skin of the labourer, the farmhand, the woman who had no choice but to toil in the open. So the gentlewoman armoured herself against it, with parasols, gloves, brimmed bonnets, and a devotion to shade that bordered on the religious. Pale was proof, visible on the face, that you did not work and did not have to. You have taken that proof and set it out to cook. Now watch what you actually do, which compounds the offence magnificently. You don't merely allow the sun to touch you, you court it. You lie still beneath it for long stretches, turning at intervals like something on a spit, occasionally checking your progress with satisfaction. In her world, this was the posture of a woman being punished by circumstance. In yours, it's a reward you saved up for, planned around and photographed. She keeps expecting you to leap up and seek shade in horror. You reapply oil instead, to attract more of the very thing she spent her life fleeing. Consider the money, because that's where she truly loses the thread. You didn't just step outside, you travelled, at expense, to somewhere hotter and sunnier than home, for the express purpose of becoming browner. In her time, spending a fortune to look like you'd been labouring in the fields would have seemed like a nobleman paying good coin to be mistaken for a stable hand. The whole point of wealth to her was to display leisure through pallor. You display leisure through tan. Same wealth, opposite skin, and the meaning flipped completely somewhere across 2 centuries. And the words you use for it undo her entirely. You call it a holiday, a treat, a glow, a healthy colour. Healthy. She'd have called it evidence of hardship. You return home darker, and everyone tells you that you look wonderful, well-rested, expensive even. The exact complexion that would have quietly lowered her in a drawing room now quietly raises you in yours. It's the same sun, the same skin, and an entirely different scoreboard, and she cannot get the 2 centuries to agree on which way is up. So she stands at the edge of your patch of sunlight, parasol reflexively raised, watching a woman pay real money to become the exact shade she was taught spelled ruin. To her you are a wealthy person impersonating a poor one for pleasure, which is madness. To you, you're just topping up your tan before the good weather ends. The pale skin she guarded like a fortune has become, in your world, slightly beside the point, and the sun she treated as an enemy has become something you book flights toward. She lowers the parasol just a little and feels the warmth. She won't admit it's nice. Now let's talk about your hair, because you've done something drastic to it and seem delighted. You've cut it short, maybe very short, and you did it in a chair while scrolling on your phone. In the Regency era, a woman's long hair was treated as one of her quiet glories, styled into elaborate arrangements of curls and pins for every occasion. Short hair on a woman usually meant illness, punishment, or scandal, something done to you rather than for you. That you chose it, paid for it, and think it looks marvellous, leaves her searching her reticule for the smelling salts once again. Let her mourn the hair first, because to her a loss has occurred. Long hair, in her world, was a slow inheritance, grown over years, tended nightly, a private treasure unpinned only in the most intimate settings. It signalled health, patience, femininity, the whole approved package. To cut it was to throw away something that could not quickly be regrown, and no one threw away treasure without a terrible reason. She scans you for the terrible reason. A fever, perhaps. A disgrace. You just show her a picture on your phone of the style you asked for. Consider the settings in which short hair appeared for her, none of them cheerful. There was illness, where hair was cropped to fight a fever, or because a bedridden woman couldn't tend it. There was punishment, where cutting a woman's hair was a public shaming. And there was scandal, the loose woman whose shorn head advertised her fall. Short hair told a story, and the story was never good. You have short hair, and the only story attached to it is that you are tired of blow-drying the long version. She waits for the rest of the tale. There is no rest. Now watch the casual manner of the deed, which multiplies the shock. You didn't agonize, didn't grieve, didn't consult a family council. You sat in a chair, Someone snipped away years of what she'd consider glory, and you looked at your phone the entire time, mildly bored. Then you paid, tipped, and walked out feeling lighter and rather pleased. In her mind, this scene should involve tears, or at least a solemn occasion. Instead, it had roughly the emotional weight of trimming a hedge, and you enjoyed the hedge results immensely. And the silence afterward baffles her most. She braces for the whispers, the raised brows, the quiet withdrawal of invitations, but your friends compliment it. Strangers admire it. Nobody assumes you're ill, disgraced, or fallen. The cut she'd read as a symptom or a sentence, everyone around you reads simply as a choice, and a stylish one. The entire coded language of women's hair, which she could read fluently, has been quietly deleted, and no one thought to tell her. You just have a haircut you like. That's the whole meaning. There isn't a hidden one. So she sits, salts in one hand, imaginary long braid clutched in the other, watching a woman who cheerfully cut away what her century treated as a woman's crown, and gained nothing but convenience and compliments. To her you have discarded a fortune for no reason and escaped all consequence, which shouldn't be possible. To you it's just easier in the mornings and it suits your face. The glory she polished every night has become, in your world, a personal preference with a good return policy. She touches her own carefully pinned hair, and for one dangerous moment wonders how it would feel to be that light. Let's watch you at the mirror, applying colour to your lips, your cheeks, your eyelids, in broad daylight, in full view of the world. The Regency lady flinches. In her time, obvious paint on the face was deeply suspect, associated with actresses and women of a certain profession, rather than with respectable ladies. The fashionable ideal was to look naturally flawless, which of course secretly involved effort, but the effort had to be hidden. You openly announcing that yes, this is makeup, yes, you bought it, and yes, you enjoy it, strikes her as a confession no lady should ever make out loud. Let her sit with the ideal she was raised on, because it was built on secrecy. A gentlewoman was meant to appear effortlessly lovely, as though her complexion had simply arrived that way by breeding and good fortune. Any enhancement had to be invisible, whispered about, denied if asked. Visible paint told the world you were performing, and performance belonged to the stage, not the drawing room. You're performing openly, at a lit mirror, describing each step aloud, treating the whole business as a craft to be proud of rather than a secret to be buried. Consider who wore obvious paint in her memory and why she winces. Actresses whose faces had to carry to the back of a candlelit theatre. Women who sold their company, whose bright cheeks and reddened lips advertised a trade. To a respectable lady, a heavily painted face was a kind of signal flare, and not the kind you wanted associated with your name. So when she sees you drawing bold colour across your eyelids in the full light of morning, some old alarm rings telling her a certain kind of woman is getting ready. Then you go to your respectable job. The alarm gets very confused. Now watch the sheer abundance you work with, which she finds almost obscene in its openness. You own many small pots and tubes and pencils in colours that make no attempt to mimic nature, blues and golds and reds that announce themselves from across a room. In her day, even the illicit paints were meant to fake a natural blush, to lie convincingly. Yours don't lie at all, they declare. A stripe of bright colour on your eyelid isn't pretending to be skin, it's pretending to be nothing but paint, and delighted about it. Honesty in cosmetics is, to her, a genuinely novel idea. And the respectability survives it all, which is the true miracle. You paint your face like a stage performer and then move through your day as a wholly respectable woman, greeted warmly, taken seriously, judged not one bit for the colour on your cheeks. The link she took as unbreakable between visible paint and questionable character has simply snapped. Makeup became a craft, a hobby, a form of play cut loose from shame entirely. You wear it to work, to weddings, to nothing in particular, and no one reaches for a coded conclusion about your morals. So she stands behind you at the mirror, salts forgotten, watching a respectable woman apply bold, unhidden colour to her face in daylight and lose absolutely no standing for it. To her, you have taken the mask of the stage and worn it into polite society and gotten away with it completely. To you, you just like how it looks and the Reds are fun this season. The paint she treated as a confession of low character has become, in your century, a small daily pleasure with no verdict attached. She peers at your eyeshadow, tilts her head, and privately admits the gold is rather striking. Here's one she needs a moment to process. You have a small drawing permanently marked into your shoulder and several tiny metal rings threaded through your ears. To the Regency lady, decorating the body itself, rather than adorning it with jewellery that could be removed, was the domain of sailors, labourers, and people at the very edges of polite society. A gentlewoman displayed her status through what she could take off, the necklaces and combs and gloves that you've chosen to write on your own body forever and think it rather pretty, sits somewhere between fascinating and unforgivable in her mind. Let her grasp the crucial distinction first, the one her whole notion of finery rested on. A lady's adornment was removable by design. Jewels were fastened on and taken off, gloves drawn on and peeled away, hair ornaments pinned and unpinned. The wealth was in the objects, and the objects could be sold, inherited, or set aside. What made adornment respectable was precisely that it wasn't part of you. Your shoulder drawing cannot be taken off. It's in you, part of you, permanent, and that permanence flips the entire meaning from finery to something she associates with the docks. Consider who bore permanent marks in her world, because the list troubled her. Sailors, back from distant voyages with strange ink under their skin, labourers and outcasts, people marked by circumstance or trade rather than by choice and taste. A permanent mark was, to her, a sign of a hard and lowly life, not an ornament of refinement. So when she sees your small, deliberate, rather delicate drawing, chosen carefully and worn with pride, her instinct places you among the roughest company she can imagine. Then she notices your soft hands and your comfortable life, and the instinct short-circuits entirely. Now the ears, which trouble her along a different line. Not one modest piercing, but several, small rings marching up the edge of your ear, each hole a permanent little decision. In her day, a single discreet piercing for a fine earring might pass, but multiplying the holes, treating your own ear as a place to arrange hardware, reads to her as excess bordering on the tribal. You did each one on purpose, sometimes on a whim, and you swap the little rings in and out as casually as she'd change gloves. The removable part she understands. It's the permanent holes underneath that make her wince, and once more the respectability holds, which is the thread she keeps tugging in disbelief. You have marked and pierced your body in ways she associates with the margins of society, and yet you sit comfortably in the centre of yours, employed, welcomed, admired. The permanent mark that would have quietly barred a woman from her drawing rooms is, in yours, a bit of personal expression people ask about warmly. The whole hierarchy of removable finery, so obvious to her, has quietly dissolved. You wear your decoration in your skin, and your skin is respected all the same. So she peers at the little drawing on your shoulder, salts drooping in her grip, studying a respectable woman who chose to be permanently, prettily marked, and lost no standing whatsoever. To her, you have adopted the ornaments of sailors and outcasts and been welcomed into polite society regardless, which rearranges everything she believed about how a body announces its rank. To you, it's just a small piece of art you liked enough to keep, and some earrings you rotate for fun. The permanence she found unforgivable has become, in your century, simply yours. She looks closer at the design. She admits quietly that it's rather fine work. Let's follow your morning routine, because next you do something she finds almost impossible to explain. You put on the tightest clothing yet, travel to a special building full of strange metal contraptions, and then you strain and sweat until you're red in the face, for no reward, no wages, and no apparent emergency. In the Regency world, visible sweat and exertion were things a lady avoided at all costs. Delicacy was prized, and a gentlewoman who overexerted herself was thought to be risking her health and her dignity. Watching you pay to exhaust yourself voluntarily, she wonders what terrible thing you're running from. Let her study the building, because everything about it confounds her. It is full of heavy metal objects that appear designed for labour, and yet no goods are produced, no crop is harvested, no useful work leaves the premises. People lift the heavy things, set them down, and lift them again, gaining nothing but heavier breathing. In her world, heavy lifting was the burden of the labourer, endured for a wage and avoided by anyone who could. Here, people have paid a fee for the privilege of the burden, and they thank the building for it afterward. Consider the clothing which offends her sense of propriety all over again. You have selected your tightest, most revealing garments specifically for this, clothes that cling and stretch and leave very little of your shape to the imagination. In her day, exertion demanded modesty be doubled, not abandoned. Yet here the whole room is dressed for movement above all else, bodies on frank display, everyone far too focused on their own straining to be scandalized by anyone else's. The delicacy she was raised to protect at all costs has been set aside entirely in favour of something she can only call purposeful sweating. Now the sweat itself, her old enemy. A gentlewoman was meant to remain cool, composed and dry, or at least to disguise any lapse with powder and shade. Visible perspiration suggested distress, poor breeding, or illness. You are drenched, deliberately, gloriously, wiping your face with a small cloth you brought, precisely because you knew you'd need it. You planned to sweat, you dressed for it, travelled for it, and consider the drenching a sign of success. To her, you look like a woman in the grip of a fever. To you, it's a good session, and you feel fantastic. And the absence of any reward is what truly defeats her understanding. There is no wage at the end, no harvest, no task completed for anyone but yourself. You strain and heave and exhaust yourself, and then you simply go home, having produced nothing but tiredness and a strange satisfaction. In her world, effort was a cost you paid towards some external gain. You have made effort the entire point, the product itself, exhaustion as a thing worth buying. The idea that a body might be strengthened on purpose, for its own sake, rather than merely spent, is genuinely new to her. So she stands among the metal contraptions, salts limp in her hand, watching a respectable woman pay good money to labour like a field hand in tight clothing until she drips, for no wage and no emergency. To her, you're either fleeing some unnamed terror or have lost your grip on the dignity of leisure entirely. To you, it's just exercise, and it keeps you feeling strong and clear-headed. The exertion she spent her life avoiding has become, in your century, a thing you seek out and cherish. She watches you finish, glowing and pleased, and privately wonders whether all that avoiding ever did her any good at all. Now here is something she almost envies. Once the shock fades, you step into a small tiled room, turn a handle, and warm clean water simply pours over your entire body, and you do this every single day. In the Regency era, a full bath was a genuine production. Servants hauled and heated water bucket by bucket, and even wealthy households did not bathe the whole body nearly as often as you might imagine. Many people relied on regular changes of clean linen instead. That you drench yourself completely each morning without a single servant breaking their back for it seems to her like the luxury of a queen, granted absurdly to everyone. Let her marvel at the water first, because to her it arrives like a small miracle. She watches you turn a single handle, and warm, clean water simply appears, endless, exactly as hot as you like it, with no fire lit and no bucket carried. In her world, water was hauled from a well or pump, heated over a hearth in batches, and poured into a tub with real labour behind every drop. It was heavy, slow, and precious. You produce a warm downpour with a flick of the wrist, use as much as you please, and then let the rest simply run away. She nearly weeps at the extravagance. Consider what a bath cost her household in effort, because that's the true measure of your luxury. A proper full bath meant servants hauling water again and again, heating it, filling a tub that cooled steadily as you sat in it, all for a single wash that couldn't be repeated casually. Because it was such work, it wasn't done often, and cleanliness was maintained instead through fresh linen worn close to the skin, changed regularly to keep a person presentable. Bathing the whole body was an occasional event, not a daily habit. You have made the event into a routine so ordinary you barely notice it. Now watch the frequency, which is the part that truly astonishes her. Not weekly, not for special occasions, but every single morning, and sometimes again at night if you've been to that sweating building. In her world, this much full bathing would have marked you as impossibly grand, or possibly as someone with a strange obsession. She keeps expecting you to treat the bath as the luxury she knows it to be, to savour it, to make an occasion of it. Instead, you do it half asleep, thinking about your day, treating a duchess's indulgence as the least remarkable part of your morning. And no one suffers for it, which reframes the whole thing for her. There is no exhausted servant behind your daily downpour, no one hauling and heating on your behalf, no cost paid in someone else's aching back. The luxury that once required a household's labour now requires only that you turn a handle, and so it has been handed to absolutely everyone, grand and humble alike. In her world, this degree of cleanliness was a privilege of rank. In yours, it's simply expected, available to all, and attached to no one suffering. That last part, she finds, is the piece she can't stop turning over. So she stands at the edge of your small tiled room, salts entirely forgotten, watching warm, clean water pour freely over a woman who considers it the dull part of waking up. To her you bathe like royalty, daily, effortlessly, guiltlessly, with no servant breaking their body to make it possible. To you it's just a shower, and you're already planning what to have for breakfast. The luxury she could scarcely afford a few times a year has become, in your century, the plain baseline of an ordinary morning. And this, at last, is the one she doesn't try to resist. She'd take this century for the hot water alone. Let's take you out for your morning drink, which is where her heart truly begins to race. You walk into a busy establishment entirely alone, order an elaborate coffee, and sit contentedly by yourself among strangers. To the Regency lady, coffee houses were largely the territory of men, places of business and politics and loud opinions, and a respectable woman certainly did not stroll into one unaccompanied to sit and think her own thoughts. That no one stops you, questions you, or hurries to fetch a male relative to collect you, tells her that either the world has become very safe or very strange, and she suspects both. Let her stand in the doorway a moment, bracing for the room to fall silent at your entrance. In her world, A woman walking alone into a coffee house would have turned every head and started a dozen quiet conversations about what had become of her. These were rooms thick with men's talk, ledgers and newspapers, and the confident noise of people who assumed the space belonged to them. You cross the threshold, and nothing happens. No head turns. The room absorbs you without comment, as though a woman alone were the most ordinary thing it had ever seen, which of course it is. Consider the drink you order, because it bewilders her before you've even sat down. In her day, coffee was coffee, dark and plain and slightly punishing. You request something with layers, a long and specific list of instructions involving temperatures, milks, and flavours, delivered fluently and without embarrassment. The young person behind the counter writes it all down as though it were perfectly reasonable, which apparently it is. She marvels that a woman may not only enter this masculine room, but issue detailed demands within it, and have them cheerfully met for the price of a few coins. Now watch you settle in, which is the part she finds almost transgressive. You don't gulp the drink and flee. You choose a seat, arrange your things, and stay, at leisure, doing nothing but existing in public with your own thoughts. In her world, a respectable woman out of doors was always going somewhere, always accompanied, always accountable. To simply sit, alone, unhurried, occupying a table for the pleasure of it, was a freedom reserved for men who had nowhere they urgently needed to be. You have claimed that freedom without even noticing it was ever withheld, and the safety of it reorders her assumptions completely. She keeps waiting for the danger the situation implies, the loss of reputation, the whispered scandal, the male relative summoned to rescue you from your own recklessness. But there is no danger visible anywhere. You're among strangers, unguarded, and entirely fine. Other women sit alone at other tables doing the same, and the whole room hums along peacefully. The vulnerability she was taught to fear, the reason a lady never went anywhere alone, has quietly faded into a background that lets you sit in public as calmly as you'd sit at home. So she takes the chair across from you, salts untouched in her reticule, watching a respectable woman occupy a man's old territory alone, at ease, and unbothered. To her you have wandered fearlessly into a room she was forbidden to enter, ordered something baroque, and then had the audacity to relax there. To you, it's just coffee before work, a small pocket of quiet you enjoy. The room she was barred from has simply become a room, open to anyone, and the drink is very good. She eyes your elaborate cup, curious despite herself, and wonders what on earth you asked them to put in it. Let's talk about your language, because you've just stubbed your toe and said something that would have gotten a Regency lady banished from 3 drawing rooms. You swear. Casually, cheerfully, in mixed company, often for emphasis rather than anger. In her time, refined speech was a mark of breeding, and coarse words in a gentlewoman's mouth were considered shocking evidence of low character. A lady was meant to express distress with a delicate gasp, perhaps a feint, never with the words you just used about a piece of furniture. She waits tensely for the heavens to respond. They do not. This unsettles her more than anything so far. Let her sit with what refined speech meant to her, because it was armour and advertisement at once. The way a woman spoke announced her breeding as surely as her gown. Careful vocabulary, gentle phrasing, an aversion to anything coarse, all of it signalled that she'd been raised properly, protected from rough company, worthy of respect. Coarse words did the opposite, marking a woman as low, unguarded, exposed to the wrong sort of life. So your casual cursing lands on her ear like a lady announcing her own ruin, loudly, over a stubbed toe, and then carrying on entirely unruined. Consider the range of your swearing, which she finds bewildering in its variety. You don't only curse in pain or anger, which you might at least understand as a lapse under strain. You curse for emphasis, for humour, for affection even, dropping a sharp word into a friendly sentence the way she might place a flower in a vase. The coarse words that were, to her, reserved for the gutter and the tavern have become, in your mouth, ordinary punctuation. You use them to season a story, to make a friend laugh, to underline your delight. Delight, cursed at. She can't place it anywhere in her rules. Now the mixed company, which multiplies her alarm. It's one thing, perhaps, for a woman to slip in her speech among trusted intimates, but you swear in front of men, in front of near strangers, in front of people whose good opinion, in her world, a woman was meant to protect above all. And those men don't recoil. They laugh, or agree, or curse right back, treating your language as the easy, common tongue of equals rather than the disgrace of a fallen woman. The careful performance of feminine refinement, which she rehearsed her whole life, has simply been set down, and no one asked you to pick it back up. And still the heavens hold their peace, which is what truly rattles her. In her imagination, this much coarse language from a woman should summon consequences, cold looks, closed doors, a reputation crumbling in real time. She watches for it, tense, expecting the room to turn against you. Instead, the conversation flows on, warm and unbothered, you're standing entirely intact. The link she took as iron between a lady's speech and a lady's worth has snapped clean. You can say the words and remain exactly as respected as before, which suggests to her that respect in your world is built on something other than the tidiness of a woman's tongue. So she sits, salts forgotten, watching a respectable woman curse cheerfully at furniture, at friends, at the general comedy of the day, and lose nothing for it. To her, you have broadcast your own downfall a dozen times before lunch, and somehow remained standing. To you, it's just how you talk, and the words carry no weight beyond the moment. The coarse language that would have banished her from every drawing room she knew has become, in your century, simply speech. She notices she wasn't shocked the third time. The fourth, she nearly smiled. Now you've seen something funny, and you laugh. Really laugh. Head back, mouth open, the sound carrying across the whole room, and other people simply smile rather than recoil. The Regency lady is scandalized on your behalf. Restraint was everything. A gentlewoman was trained to laugh softly, behind a fan if possible, never drawing loud attention to herself. Boisterous laughter suggested a lack of self-control, and self-control was the entire performance of being a lady. Your open, unbothered, room-filling laugh strikes her as magnificent and reckless in equal measure, and some small buried part of her, we suspect, wishes she could join in. Let her recall the choreography of the approved laugh, because it was a genuine skill. A lady's amusement was meant to be contained. A soft sound, a lowered gaze, the fan raised to shield the open mouth from view. The whole aim was to signal that even her joy was governed, that she never let feeling spill past the borders of propriety. Loud laughter broke every one of those borders at once. It was uncontained, drew eyes, filled a space that a lady was meant to occupy quietly. To laugh as you do would have marked her as unschooled, unguarded, faintly out of control. Consider your posture, because that alone would have horrified her. Your head tips back. Your mouth opens fully. No fan, no shielding hand. The whole undignified mechanics of joy on display. In her world, this abandon of the body was as troubling as the noise, a woman visibly overtaken by feeling, forgetting for a moment to compose herself. You forget to compose yourself constantly, on purpose. because the joke was good and the composing felt beside the point. The fan she'd have hidden behind isn't even in your hand. There is no fan. There's only your laughter, uncovered and complete. Now the volume, which travels where a lady's amusement was never meant to reach. Your laugh crosses the whole room, announcing your delight to strangers, filling a public space with the private fact of your happiness. In her world, a woman claimed as little space as possible, in voice as in body, and a laugh that carried was a laugh that overstepped. You overstep gladly. Your joy takes up room, and you don't apologize for the room it takes. She watches you fill the space with sound and waits for someone to be offended by the sheer size of your happiness. And here is the turn she doesn't expect. No one is offended. The people around you smile, some laugh along, drawn toward your delight rather than repelled by it. The loud laugh she was taught would mark a woman as coarse instead makes you warm, magnetic, good company. The restraint she practiced her whole life, the fan and the lowered gaze and the carefully governed joy produced a quieter woman, but not, she begins to suspect, a happier one. Something buried in her stirs at the sound of you. Some memory of a laugh she once swallowed for the sake of a room that has since stopped existing. So she sits beside you, salts abandoned, watching a respectable woman laugh with her whole chest in public and be loved for it rather than lowered by it. To her, you're magnificently, recklessly unrestrained, a lady who forgot the fan and gained the room. To you, something was funny and you laughed the way people do. The governed amusement she perfected has given way in your century to joy, allowed its full volume. And when the next joke lands, she notices her own mouth twitching, the fan of habit half raised, and she lets it drop. And she almost lets the sound out too. Let's step outside together. Or rather, let's watch you step outside completely alone. No older married woman trailing behind you. No maid, no relative appointed to guard your reputation. You simply leave. For an unmarried gentlewoman in 1813, this was nearly unthinkable. Her honour was fragile currency, and being seen unaccompanied could invite gossip that ruined her marriage prospects for good. A chaperone was not an insult, it was armour. That you wander the city freely all day, answerable to no chaperone at all, makes the Regency lady clutch her salts and quietly admire your nerve. Let her explain what the chaperone truly was, because it wasn't merely a nuisance in her mind. It was protection, in a world where a woman's worth was tied to her spotless reputation, and reputation could be stained by mere appearance. An unmarried woman seen alone with a man, or simply seen wandering unaccompanied, could have stories told about her that no truth could later scrub away. The chaperone stood as a witness to her respectability, a living guarantee that nothing improper had occurred. To go without one wasn't freedom, in her world. It was leaving the house with no shield at all. Consider who the chaperone answered to, because that's the part she assumes still applies. A young woman's movements were, in effect, licensed by the household, approved and supervised, her honour treated as a family asset too valuable to leave untended. You step out the door having asked no one, informed no one, sought no approval and arranged no escort. There is no married aunt adjusting her bonnet to follow you, no maid hurrying to keep pace. The whole apparatus of supervision that governed her every outing simply isn't there. You closed the door behind yourself and the day became entirely yours. Now watch where the freedom takes you, because it's the ordinariness that stuns her most. You don't do anything scandalous with your unsupervised day. You run errands, meet a friend, sit in that coffee house, walk a long way just because the weather is fine. The lack of a chaperone doesn't produce ruin. It produces a perfectly normal life, lived at your own direction. In her world, the absence of the shield implied disaster would surely follow. In yours, the absence of the shield simply means you got to decide your own afternoon, and nothing dreadful came of deciding it. And the reputation she'd expect to see crumbling stays perfectly intact. No stories trail you home. No marriage prospect is quietly withdrawn because you were seen alone near the shops. The gossip machine she feared, the one that could ruin a woman on appearances, either doesn't exist in your world or has lost all its old power over you. Your honour, it turns out, isn't a fragile thing others hold in trust and can shatter with a rumour. It's yours, steady, unbothered by whether anyone was watching you walk. That last idea, that a woman's standing might not depend on being witnessed, takes her a long moment to hold. So she trails you through the streets out of old habit, the phantom chaperone she never asked for, salts in hand, watching a respectable woman move through a whole city alone and come to no harm at all. To her, you walk unshielded through a world that should be full of danger to your name. To you, you're just out running your life, answerable to yourself. The armour she never left home without has become, in your century, unnecessary, because the thing it guarded against has largely gone. She stops trailing you. She realises she doesn't have to. And she finds, to her surprise, that the not having to feels like the point. Here's one that requires several explanations before she can even be horrified properly. You pick up your glowing rectangle, and you send words directly to a man first, without waiting for him to write to you, at an hour when all decent people should be asleep, about nothing of importance. In the Regency world, correspondence between an unmarried woman and a man was governed by strict rules, and a lady writing first, casually and after dark, would have signalled something scandalous about her intentions. That you do this while lying in bed eating snacks, purely because you felt like it, redraws her entire map of what women are permitted to want. Let her first understand the miracle of the message itself, before she can even reach the scandal of it. In her world, a letter took days, was written with care, sealed, entrusted to the post, and awaited with patience across long silences. Your words leave your fingers and arrive in his hand in the space of a breath. No seal, no post, no waiting. She struggles even to picture correspondence so instant it barely deserves the name. Then she remembers what you've actually done with this miracle, and the marvel curdles back into alarm because you used it to write to a man first. Consider the rules you've broken, because in her world they came in a strict and knowable order. A lady did not open a correspondence with a gentleman. She waited. He wrote, if it was proper, through channels with intention, and she replied within bounds. The one who wrote first declared interest, and for a woman to declare, it was to hand over a weapon that could be used against her name. You wrote first plainly, with no channel and no chaperoning hand, announcing your interest as easily as remarking on the weather. The careful game of who speaks first, which shaped her whole understanding of courtship, you've simply refused to play. Now the hour, which compounds the offence in her eyes. Not the respectable daylight in which proper correspondence was composed, but the deep middle of the night, when in her world only trouble was awake. A message sent after dark carried a heat, an intimacy, a suggestion of secrets that no daytime letter would. You send yours at midnight, from your bed, surrounded by snacks, with roughly the emotional weight of a shrug. The scandalous hour that would have shrieked improper intentions is, to you, just when you happen to think of something mildly amusing to share. The heat she reads into it isn't there. There's only a snack and a passing thought. And the nothingness of the content defeats her final defence. She could perhaps brace herself for a bold woman writing a man first, if the matter were grave, a warning, an urgent word. But you write about nothing, a joke, an idle question, a small observation not worth a stamp. In her world, correspondence was too costly and too fraught to spend on trifles. You spend it on trifles constantly, back and forth, an endless casual river of little nothings between women and men who owe each other no formal thing. The whole weighty architecture of courtship letters has dissolved into easy, meaningless, delightful chatter. So she perches on the edge of your bed, salts in one hand, watching a respectable woman message a man first, at midnight, about nothing, purely for the small pleasure of it. To her, you've broken every rule of correspondence at once and suffered no consequence but a friendly reply. To you, you just had a thought and sent it, the way you send 100. The strict order of who may write whom, and when, and why, has become, in your century, no order at all, and in the freedom of that she glimpses something she was never allowed to reach for. A want, expressed simply, because it was yours to express. Let's talk about your romantic life, which she finds both thrilling and alarming. You meet men, spend time with them, decide whether you like them, and if you don't, you simply move on to another, all without a single formal engagement or family negotiation. In the Regency era, courtship was a serious, supervised and often financially motivated affair aimed squarely at marriage. A lady did not sample suitors for enjoyment, that you treat the whole thing as something to explore at your own pace, with your own judgment, and no dowry discussions whatsoever, makes her wonder who exactly is managing your future. The answer, of course, is you. Let her recall what courtship weighed in her world, because it was never light. It was the negotiation of a woman's entire future, her security, her standing, often the fortunes of her whole family, all riding on a match made young and made carefully. Suitors were assessed less for how they made a heart feel than for what they brought in land, income and connection. The process was watched, guided and hurried toward its single proper end, a marriage. You have taken this grave and consequential machinery and turned it into something closer to a pastime, and she cannot find where the seriousness went. Consider the plurality, which alarms her most directly. Not one suitor courted with intention toward marriage, but several, met one after another, or thereabouts, each given a fair hearing before you decide. In her world, entertaining more than one man's attentions at once was a fast route to a ruined name, the mark of a woman not to be trusted. You do it openly and cheerfully, treating each meeting as information, a way to learn what you like and don't. The exclusivity that guarded a lady's reputation has given way to a frank, unhurried sampling that would have scandalized every matron she knew. Now watch how easily you release the ones who don't suit, because the freedom of it startles her. In her world, extracting oneself from a serious courtship was delicate and often impossible, tangled up in expectation, family, and the fear of what people would say. You simply decide a man isn't right, tell him so, and move on, both of you carrying on with your lives largely undamaged. No dowry has been discussed to unpick, no families have shaken hands, no future has been staked. The low stakes she can scarcely imagine are precisely what let you choose honestly, keeping only what you actually want. And the absence of any manager is the piece that truly reorders her thinking. She keeps looking for the hand guiding all this, the father weighing incomes, the mother steering you toward advantage, the family council with a stake in the outcome. There isn't one. You are the father, the mother, and the council. You weigh the suitors, you judge the fit, you decide the pace and the ending, and your standard is not what the match brings your family, but whether the person is right for you. The whole apparatus that once decided a woman's future has been replaced by the woman herself deciding. So she watches you move through your romantic life, salts in hand, as you meet men on your own terms, keep the ones you like, and release the rest without ruin. To her, you are gambling recklessly with a matter that should be gravely managed by others. To you, you're just getting to know people until one of them is worth keeping. The serious, supervised, family-run business of courtship has become, in your century, a thing you conduct yourself, for yourself, at your own pace. And underneath the alarm she feels the thrill of it, the sheer idea that a woman's heart might be her own to spend. Now brace her for this one gently. You share your home with a man you love, cooking together, sleeping together, splitting the bills, and you are not married, and you may not marry for years, if ever. To the Regency lady this arrangement had a name, and it was not a polite one. Living openly with a man outside marriage would have destroyed a gentlewoman's standing entirely, cutting her off from respectable society for good. That your neighbours know, your family knows, and everyone simply accepts it as a normal stage of life leaves her genuinely speechless, which for her is a considerable achievement. Let her sit with the enormity of it, because in her world this was among the very worst falls a woman could take. Marriage was the line that separated the respectable from the ruined, and to live with a man on the wrong side of that line was to place yourself beyond rescue. It wasn't a private matter. It was a public catastrophe, the sort that ended invitations, severed family ties, and followed a woman as a permanent shadow. She braces for the fallout of your arrangement, the scandalized whispers, the closing doors. She waits. The doors stay open. The neighbours wave. Consider the sheer openness, which is what she cannot reconcile. In her world, if such an arrangement existed at all, it was hidden, denied, wrapped in shame. You hide nothing. Your family visits and shares meals with you both. Your neighbours know exactly who lives here and think nothing of it. You refer to the man as your partner, casually, in public, and no one flinches. The secrecy that would have been survival in her world is simply absent from yours, because there's nothing to keep secret, because the thing itself is no longer a disgrace. It's just where you live and who you live with. Now watch the ordinary domesticity of it, which strips away the last of her expectations. You cook together in the evenings, arguing gently about the food. You split the household costs like partners in a small, warm enterprise. You share a bed and a life and a set of keys, building something that looks, in every practical way, like a marriage, minus the ceremony and the paperwork. In her world, this shape of shared life belonged only inside wedlock, and to have it without the vows was to have counterfeit respectability. In yours, it's a genuine and honoured stage of life, chosen freely, with no fraud in it at all. And the possibility that you may never marry is the part that leaves her truly wordless. You might wed one day, you might not, and be perfectly content building decades of shared life without ever signing the register. In her world, marriage was the necessary destination, the only proper end to any bond between a man and woman, the thing that made everything else legitimate. You have detached the life from the ceremony entirely, keeping the partnership and treating the wedding as optional, an event you'll hold if you feel like it, or won't. The destination she thought mandatory has become for you one choice among several, and none of them a disgrace. So she stands in your shared kitchen, salts entirely forgotten, watching a respectable woman build an openly unmarried life with a man she loves while her family sets the table and her neighbours think nothing of it. To her you are living the one arrangement that should have ended you, and instead you seem thoroughly, ordinarily happy. To you it's just your home, your person, your life together. The line between respectable and ruined that she never dared approach has, in your century, quietly dissolved, and in its dissolving she sees a life she'd have been forbidden even to want, laid out plainly on a Tuesday over dinner. Let's suppose you do choose to marry one day. You'll marry for love, someone you selected yourself, with little regard for their income, their land, or whether the match improves your family's fortunes, or you may simply choose never to marry and remain perfectly content. In the Regency world, marriage was often the single most important economic decision of a woman's life, and remaining unmarried usually meant dependence on relatives and a lifetime labelled a spinster. That you view marriage as optional and love as the deciding factor rather than acreage strikes the Regency lady as either wildly romantic or dangerously impractical, depending on the hour. Let her recall what marriage decided in her world, because it decided nearly everything. It set a woman's income, her home, her standing, her security in old age, all in a single choice made once and rarely undone. Because so much rode on it, love was a luxury the match could seldom afford. A wise family weighed a suitor's land and fortune, his connections and prospects, and a woman's own heart came somewhere well down the list, if it made the list at all. To marry for feeling alone, ignoring all that hard practicality, would have seemed to her like staking your whole life on a whim. Consider your standard, which reverses her priorities entirely. You look first at whether you love the person, whether they're kind, whether a life shared with them would be a good one. Their income you can supply yourself. Their land is beside the point. Whether the match lifts your family's fortunes doesn't enter your thinking at all, because your fortunes are your own to make. The very factors that topped her list, security and advantage, you've set aside as things you already provide for yourself, freeing you to choose on the one basis her world could rarely allow. Love, at the top of the list, because nothing more urgent is competing for the spot. Now the other path, the one that undoes her most, you might not marry at all. And if you don't, you won't be a pitied dependent in a relative's spare room, a spinster whispered about and quietly supported out of duty. You'll have your own income, your own home, your own full life, marriage or no marriage. In her world, the unmarried woman was a burden and a cautionary tale, her singleness a failure to be softened by charity. In yours, it's simply a life, as complete and respectable as any other. The word spinster has lost its sting because the fate behind it has lost its teeth, and the optionality is what she keeps circling, unable to file it away. In her world, marriage wasn't a choice so much as a necessity dressed as a choice, the thing a woman must secure or suffer for lacking. You treat it as genuinely optional, a door you may walk through if the right person stands beyond it, and may leave closed with no penalty if not. That a woman's whole future need not hinge on catching a husband, that she might build security, and standing entirely on her own, and marry only for love or not at all, is an arrangement so free of the old pressures that she has to keep reminding herself it's real. So she considers you, salts in hand, a woman who will marry only for love, or contentedly not at all, secure and respected either way. To her, you are either the luckiest romantic alive or a gambler ignoring every sensible rule. To you, marriage is just one possible shape a good life might take, chosen for the heart or set aside without shame. The single most consequential decision of her world has become, in yours, a matter of preference. And whether she finds it romantic or reckless, she notices, depends entirely on how brave she's feeling that hour. Here's a concept she keeps circling back to, unable to file it anywhere. You have men in your life who are simply friends. You meet them for meals, text them your problems, hug them hello, and there is no romance, no scandal, and no expectation of marriage attached to any of it. In the Regency era, the space between courtship and family was very narrow, and a close, casual friendship between an unmarried woman and an unrelated man would have raised his eyebrows and invited assumptions that you can genuinely, comfortably be friends with a man with nothing owed and nothing implied, reorders something fundamental in how she understands the whole business of men and women. Let her map the categories she was given, because they left no room for what you have. In her world, an unrelated man was almost always one of a few things: a suitor, a potential suitor, or a danger to be chaperoned against. He was rarely, if ever, simply a friend. Every prolonged closeness with a man carried an implied trajectory toward courtship, toward marriage, or toward scandal if it led nowhere proper. There was no neutral ground where a woman and an unrelated man might simply enjoy each other's company, with no destination in mind. You live on that neutral ground comfortably, as though it had always existed. Consider the ease of your dealings, which unsettles her assumptions. You meet these men for meals, just the two of you sometimes, and nothing is presumed. You tell them your troubles and hear theirs, a genuine exchange of confidence with no romance underneath it. You greet them with an easy embrace and part the same way, and no one reads a courtship into the contact. In her world, each of these small acts, the private meal, the shared confidence, the touch, would have been a step along a path that led to only one respectable place. You perform them as friendship, whole and sufficient in itself, going nowhere and needing to go nowhere. Now the absence of assumption, which is what she keeps failing to file. When you spend an afternoon with a male friend, no one asks when the engagement will be announced. No aunt frets, no rumour stirs, no one concludes that closeness must mean courtship. In her world, the eyebrow raised almost automatically, because the categories allowed nothing else. In yours, the possibility of pure friendship is simply understood, taken for granted, so ordinary it needs no defending. The reflex to read romance into every warm bond between a woman and a man has, in your century, largely gone quiet, and its silence is what she notices most. And the nothing owed of it is the peace that reorders her deepest assumptions. These friendships carry no debt, no implied promise, no expectation that all this warmth must eventually be paid off in marriage or ended in scandal. You give and receive affection freely, and the account simply balances as friendship, needing no further settlement. In her world, a man's attentions always implied he was owed something, or hoped to be, and a woman's warmth was currency spent toward a match. You've unlinked warmth from obligation entirely. You can care for a man, and he for you, and that be the whole of it. So she watches you laugh over lunch with a man who is only ever your friend, salts idle in her lap, trying to place a bond her world gave her no name for. To her, this closeness should be leading somewhere, meaning something, risking something. To you, it's just friendship, one of the plain good things in a life full of them. The narrow space between courtship and family that hemmed her in has widened, in your century, into open ground where a woman and a man may simply be fond of each other. And on that open ground she sees, a woman gets to have far more people in her life to love. Let's follow you into the evening, because you're going out at night by yourself, and you'll return whenever you feel like it. No escort, no curfew, no anxious relative waiting up to guard your name. For a gentlewoman of 1813, the hours after dark carried real danger, both to her safety and her reputation, and being out alone at night was reserved for women society had already written off. That you move through the lamplit streets freely, keys in hand, deciding your own hour of return, appears to the Regency lady as an almost unimaginable kind of ownership over your own evening. Let her recall what nightfall meant for a woman in her world, because it drew a hard line across the day. Once darkness came, the streets belonged to danger and to men, and a respectable woman withdrew indoors, her outings finished, her evening handed over to the household. To be abroad after dark, alone, was to court both harm and ruin at once, for a woman seen out at night was assumed to be the kind of woman who had nothing left to protect. The lamplit hours you moved through so freely were to her hours a lady simply surrendered. Consider the streets themselves, dimly lit in her memory and full of unknown threat. Without escort, without the household's protection, a woman alone in them was terribly exposed to violence, to accusation, to stories that would outlive any truth. The escort wasn't a formality. It was the difference between safety and peril. You walk the same evening streets with no escort at all, keys in your hand, phone in your pocket, unhurried and unafraid. The peril she took as certain, the reason a woman never went out alone at night, has thinned into a background you barely think about, a caution rather than a cage. Now the absence of a curfew, which she keeps expecting to reassert itself. In her world, even a daytime outing answered to the household's clock, and the evening most of all. A woman's hours were not entirely her own. You have no hour by which you must be home, no relative sitting up to receive you, no account to give of where the evening went. You'll return when you're ready, at whatever hour suits you, and let yourself in with your own key to a home that asks you nothing. The clock that governed her comings and goings has, for you, simply stopped ticking. You keep your own time. And the ownership of the evening is what strikes her most deeply. In her world, the hours after dark were something a woman gave up. Ceded to men and to danger and to the household's rules, you possess them. The night is yours to spend as you like, on friends, on wandering, on whatever you please, and it ends when you decide it ends. That a woman might own her evenings outright, might treat the dark hours as territory rather than threat, is a kind of freedom she was never offered. It isn't only that you're safe out there, it's that the time itself belongs to you. So she stands at your door as you head out into the lamplit dark, salts forgotten, watching a respectable woman claim the night as casually as she'd claim the afternoon. To her, you're walking unescorted into hours a lady was taught to fear and surrender. To you, you're just going out, and you'll be back when you're back. The evening she was made to hand over each day has become in your century yours to keep, safe enough to walk and free enough to spend. And as you disappear down the bright street, keys in hand, she understands she doesn't need to wait up. No one does. The night is simply yours now. Now here is the one that makes her sit down properly. You have work, not embroidery, not household management, but paid employment with a title, a purpose, and prospects that are entirely yours. In the Regency world, a gentlewoman who needed income had almost no respectable options, the most common being governess, a lonely and often thankless position at the edge of a household. Ambition, in the professional sense, simply was not offered to her. That you have a career you chose and speak of climbing higher in it tells the Regency lady that the entire ceiling above women has quietly been lifted, and she isn't sure whether to weep or applaud. Let her recall the narrow shelf of options her world offered a gentlewoman in need of money. There was the governess, teaching another family's children while belonging to neither the servants nor the family, respected by no one and lonely in the gap between. There was the paid companion, a genteel sort of servitude to some wealthy elderly woman, and there was very little else that a lady might do without losing her rank. Work for her class was mostly a quiet admission of misfortune. You call your work a career, say it with pride, and treat it as a source of standing rather than a loss of it. Consider that your work has a title, a name that means something out in the world, a role you introduce yourself by. In her world, a woman's identity flowed from her family and her marriage, whose daughter she was, whose wife she'd become. You have an identity that is simply yours, earned, professional, unattached to any man. When strangers ask what you do, you answer with the work, not the household, and the answer places you somewhere in the world on your own account. The idea that a woman might be known first for what she does rather than for whom she belongs to, is entirely new to her. Now the ambition, which is the part that makes her sit down. You don't merely hold your position, you intend to rise in it, to climb toward more responsibility, more skill, more standing, on the strength of your own effort. In her world, ambition was a man's engine, the thing that drove sons toward fortune while daughters were steered toward good marriages. A woman with professional ambition had nowhere to point it. You point yours confidently upward, and the ceiling that stopped her simply isn't there above you. You describe where you mean to go as though the going were plainly allowed, because it plainly is, and the fact that you chose the work reorders her sense of a woman's life entirely. You weren't placed in it by misfortune or family arrangement. You looked at the wide field of possible work and selected the thing that suited your mind and your interests. In her world, choice was scarcely part of a woman's relationship to labour, since labour itself was mostly to be avoided. You made a positive choice toward a calling, pursued it, and built a life around it that is meaningful on its own terms. The work isn't a fallback from a failed marriage. It's a life you wanted and went and got. So she sits, salts in hand, watching a respectable woman speak of her career and her ambitions with the easy confidence her world reserved for men. To her, the ceiling that capped every woman's prospects has been lifted so high she can't find it. To you, it's just your job, and you have plans for it. The narrow shelf of governess and companion has widened, in your century, into a whole open field a woman may choose from and climb through, and watching you she can't decide whether to weep for what she was never offered or applaud what you simply take for granted. She does little of both. Let's follow that money, because this next part astonishes her even more. The wages you earn are yours. You decide how they're spent, saved, or given away, and no husband, father, or brother has any claim on them. In the Regency era, a married woman's property and income generally passed into her husband's control the moment she wed, a legal reality that left many women financially powerless despite their birth. That you hold your own earnings, in your own account, spending them entirely as you wish, represents to the Regency lady a form of independence she was never permitted to imagine for herself. Let her sit with the legal reality that shaped her world, because it was harsher than mere custom. Upon marriage, a woman's money and much of her property generally ceased to be hers in any practical sense, folding into her husband's control. What she brought to the marriage, what she might inherit, even in many cases what she might earn, could pass into his hands to manage as he saw fit. A wife could be born to wealth and still hold no real power over a single coin of it. Her security depended entirely on her husband's character. You hold your own money outright, and no husband's character enters into it. Consider the account that is yours alone, a thing she can barely picture. Your wages arrive into a store of money that bears your name and answers to no one but you. No father approves your spending, no brother oversees your savings, no husband decides what you may and may not buy. In her world, a woman's financial life was always mediated through a man, her access to her own resources filtered through his permission. You have no filter. The money goes where you send it, and the only judgment involved is your own. That the mediating man is simply gone and the resources flow straight to you is the piece she keeps turning over. Now watch what you do with it, because the freedom is total and casual. You spend on what you please, small pleasures and large decisions alike, without seeking anyone's leave. You save toward your own goals, chosen by you, for a future you're shaping yourself. You give money away to causes and people you decide are worthy, an act of independent generosity her world would have rooted through a husband's approval. Each of these ordinary choices represents a power her world withheld from wives entirely. You wield it a dozen times a day without noticing its power at all. To you, it's just managing your money. To her, it's sovereignty. And the security underneath it is what moves her most. In her world, a woman's financial safety was borrowed, dependent on the goodwill of the man who controlled her means and could vanish if he proved unwise or unkind. Your security is your own, generated by your own work, held in your own name, and it cannot be taken by a husband's whim or squandered by his folly. You don't depend on a man's competence to be safe. You are, in the most concrete way, the guardian of your own future. The powerlessness she took as simply the condition of being a wife has, in your century, been replaced by a woman standing on her own ground. So she watches you move your own money as you see fit, salts forgotten, a woman whose earnings answer to no man at all. To her you hold an independence so complete she was never allowed even to imagine it. To you it's just your account, your wages, your call. The legal reality that made wives financially powerless has fallen away, and in its place stands a woman who earns, keeps and commands her own means. And of all the scandals of your ordinary day, this is the one she'd trade almost anything to have had. To hold her own coin and answer to no one for it. She never got to know the feeling. Now show her the deed, because you own property, outright, in your own name, with no man's signature required. In her world, this was extraordinarily rare and legally fraught, especially for a married woman whose belongings were often no longer legally her own. A single woman had somewhat more standing, but property and inheritance were still shaped overwhelmingly to favour sons and husbands. That you, a woman, simply bought a home, hold the keys and answer to no one about it, strikes the Regency lady as the sort of security she spent her whole life being told she could only obtain through marriage. Let her hold the deed and understand what it represents, because in her world such a document in a woman's own name was almost a marvel. Property was the bedrock of security and standing, and it was arranged by law and by custom to flow towards sons and husbands. A married woman's belongings often ceased to be legally hers. A single woman fared somewhat better, but the whole machinery of inheritance and ownership still leaned hard away from her. For a woman to hold a home outright, in her own name, needing no man's consent, was rare enough to raise eyebrows and questions. You hold exactly such a deed, and it raises nothing at all. Consider how you came by it, because the plainness of it stuns her. You didn't inherit it through some unusual arrangement, or receive it from a husband, or hold it in trust through a male relative. You earned money, decided you wanted a home of your own, and bought one. The whole transaction conducted by you, signed by you, completed in your name. In her world, a woman acquiring property on her own account through her own means, without a man anywhere in the chain, was scarcely conceivable. You did it as an ordinary adult decision, the way one might in her world buy a bonnet, only far larger and entirely yours. Now the keys, which she keeps returning to as proof, they are yours. The home they open is yours. You may paint its walls, change its locks, invite whom you please, and turn away whom you please, all on your own authority. No husband holds a superior claim. No father must approve your choices within it. No brother oversees its keeping. In her world, a woman's relationship to any home was almost always as someone else's dependent. A daughter under her father's roof. A wife under her husband's. You are under your own roof, and the roof is under your own name. The distinction is everything, and the security it gives you is precisely the thing her world insisted a woman could only marry into. In her day, a woman's safe place in the world came through a husband, her home, her standing, her shelter in old age, all borrowed from his. To be unmarried was too often to be without a secure place of one's own. You have a secure place of your own without a husband anywhere in it. The stone-solid safety her world dangled, as marriage's chief reward, you simply bought and hold and answer to no one for. The one door, she was told, led only through a wedding. You walked through alone, key in hand. So she stands in your home, deed in her hands, salts entirely forgotten, taking in the enormity of a woman who owns her own walls in her own name. To her you possess the deepest security her world offered, and you got it without the marriage that was supposed to be its only price. To you, it's just your place, the home you bought and love. The property that once flowed only towards sons and husbands now sits squarely in a woman's name, hers to keep. And of all the things she's watched today, this is the one that feels less like scandal and more like a promise she was never told a woman could be made. Let's climb into your carriage, except it has no horses, it roars, and you are the one driving it. Alone, wherever you please. In the Regency world, a lady being driven was normal, but the driving itself was generally a man's task, and a woman controlling her own transport, unaccompanied, over long distances, was not the expectation. That you operate a fast metal machine by yourself, choosing your own destination without asking permission or arranging an escort, tells the Regency lady that the very question of who is allowed to go where and how has been answered entirely in your favour. Let her climb in beside you and marvel at the machine before she even reaches the scandal of who's driving it. There are no horses, yet it moves, and moves fast, faster than any carriage she ever rode, powered by something she can neither see nor understand. It roars to life at a touch, and answers to levers and pedals under your hands and feet. In her world, transport meant animals, their care, their pace, their limits. You command a force with none of an animal's needs, and command it easily, and she's still recovering from the horselessness of it when she remembers the greater shock, that the one commanding it is you. Consider who did the driving in her world, because it was rarely a lady. A gentlewoman was a passenger, conveyed by a coachman or a male relative, her role to be transported rather than to transport. The handling of the vehicle, the control of the horses, the decisions of route and speed, these fell to men. A woman controlling her own conveyance, especially over any real distance and especially alone, was not what her world expected of her. You are not the passenger, you are the driver, hands on the controls, eyes on the road, the whole machine answering to your judgment alone. The role she was assigned you've simply set aside. Now the destination's chosen entirely by you. You don't request to be taken somewhere and wait for a man's agreement. You decide where you're going, and you go, whether it's near or far, familiar or new, on a whim or a plan. In her world, a woman's movements were negotiated, dependent on the availability of a driver and the approval of those who governed her outings. Your movements depend on nothing but your own wish and a full tank. The question of where a woman may go, once answered by others, is now answered by you, every single time without anyone else's voice in it. And the speed is the flourish that undoes her. Not the careful, animal-limited pace of a carriage, but real speed. The landscape rushing past, distances that would have taken her a hard day's travel folded into a single easy hour. You choose that speed yourself, faster or slower as you like, in full control of how quickly the world goes by. In her world, a woman had no hand on the reins of her own velocity, literal or otherwise. You hold it directly. You decide not only where you go, but how fast you get there, and the whole rushing power of it sits under your own steady hands. So she grips the edge of the seat, salts forgotten, watching a respectable woman command a roaring, horseless machine alone, at speed, toward a destination she chose herself. To her, you have seized a control her world reserved for men and made it look effortless. To you, you're just driving, running an errand, going where you please. The question of who may go where and how fast once decided over a woman's head has become, in your century, hers to answer. And as the road rushes past under your command, she feels something she never felt in any carriage, the particular thrill of a woman going exactly where she wants, as fast as she likes, because she decided to. Now, here's where she nearly loses the thread completely. You pack a small bag, board a machine that flies, and travel to a foreign country by yourself, purely for enjoyment. In the Regency era, travel was slow, expensive, and for a gentlewoman, almost always chaperoned and justified by necessity rather than pleasure. A woman journeying abroad entirely alone, for the simple joy of seeing somewhere new, would have been considered reckless at best and ruinous at worst. That you do it casually, posting cheerful pictures along the way, reshapes the Regency lady's sense of just how large a woman's world is now allowed to be. Let her grapple with the flying first, because it precedes every other astonishment. You board a machine that lifts entirely off the ground and carries you through the sky, across distances that in her world meant weeks of hard, dangerous travel, and it does so in mere hours. She can scarcely accept that people fly at all, let alone that they do it casually, packed in rows, mildly bored, waiting for a meal. Then she recalls the greater marvel, that you're doing this alone, and for no reason but that you wanted to see somewhere new, and the flying becomes almost the least of it. Consider what travel cost a gentlewoman in her world, in effort and in reputation both. It was slow, expensive and physically taxing, and for a lady it was hedged about with rules. She rarely travelled far without a chaperone, and rarely at all without a solid reason, a family duty, a marriage, a matter of necessity. Travel for its own sake, for the pure pleasure of seeing new places, was a freedom mostly granted to men on their grand tours. You travel for exactly that reason, pleasure, and you travel alone, unchaperoned, needing no justification beyond your own curiosity. The necessity that once had to excuse a woman's journey, you've replaced with simple wanting. Now the being alone, which in her world would have been the ruin of it. An unchaperoned woman abroad, in a foreign country, among strangers whose language she might not even speak, would have been seen as recklessly exposed to danger and to scandal alike. The chaperone was meant to guard both her safety and her name across every unfamiliar mile. You cross those miles with no guardian at all, navigating strange cities on your own judgment, and you return not ruined but glowing, full of stories. The vulnerability her world took as certain, the reason a lady never travelled alone, has thinned enough that you move through the whole wide world on your own. And the cheerful record you keep of it is the final touch that reshapes her sense of a woman's world. You don't hide the journey or downplay it. You post bright pictures along the way, sharing the adventure openly, proud of the places you've seen and the fact that you saw them yourself. In her world, such a journey, if a woman dared it at all, would have been something to explain away, to justify, perhaps to be quietly ashamed of. You broadcast it as a joy and a triumph, and everyone who sees it thinks only that it looks wonderful. The shame that would have shadowed her steps is nowhere on yours. So she sits, salts abandoned, watching a respectable woman fly across the world alone, for fun, and share the delight of it without a trace of fear or shame. To her, you have made the entire globe a woman's playground, reachable, safe enough, and yours to explore on your own. To you, it's just a trip, a bag packed, a flight caught, a new place seen. The narrow, chaperoned, necessity-bound travel her world allowed, a woman has opened, in your century, into a whole planet a woman may cross alone for the sheer pleasure of it. And the size of that world, she realizes, is the size a woman's life is now allowed to be. Let's talk about power, real power, because you possess something she never held. You vote. Your voice counts equally in choosing who governs the entire country, and no one can lawfully take that from you. In the Regency world, political power belonged to a narrow slice of propertied men, and women had no formal say in government whatsoever, regardless of their intelligence or rank. The notion that your opinion on the nation's leadership carries the same weight as any man's would have seemed to the Regency lady like a fantasy told to comfort children. That it's simply your ordinary right leaves her quietly stunned. Let her understand how tightly power was held in her world, because the circle was small indeed. The right to choose those who governed belonged to a narrow band of propertied men, and even among men it was far from universal. Women, whatever their birth, their cleverness, their fortune, stood entirely outside it. A brilliant, wealthy, well-connected woman had no more formal say in the nation's governance than the poorest labourer, which is to say none at all. Politics happened over women's heads, decided by men, in rooms women could not enter. You enter the equivalent room, and you cast a vote, and it counts. Consider what it means that your voice weighs the same as any man's. Not a lesser vote, not a voice filtered through a husband or father, but a full and equal share in the choice, identical in weight to the vote of any man in the land. In her world, a woman's political influence, if she had any, could only be exercised sideways, through whispered persuasion of the men who actually held power. You need no such indirection. You mark your choice yourself, and it enters the count as one full voice among millions, no different in weight from anyone else's. The equality of it, plain and legal, is what she keeps returning to. Now the security of the right, which she finds almost harder to believe than the right itself, it isn't a favour extended to you that might be withdrawn, or a privilege dependent on some man's continued goodwill. It's your right, protected by law, and no one may lawfully strip it from you. In her world, whatever small influence a woman scraped together was informal and revocable, held at the pleasure of others. Your say in the nation's governance rests on firmer ground than that. It belongs to you as a matter of right, not permission, and that it cannot simply be taken away strikes her as the most solid thing of all. And the ordinariness of it to you is what leaves her most stunned. You don't treat your vote as a marvel or a hard-won prize. It's simply part of being an adult, a thing you do periodically without much ceremony, sometimes even grumbling about the inconvenience. In her world, this power was so far beyond a woman's reach that to promise it would have sounded like a fairy story. You hold it so casually you occasionally forget to feel the weight of it. The fantasy that would have comforted her like a tale told to a child is, in your century, just a Tuesday errand, marked on a calendar between other tasks. So she watches you exercise a power she never dreamed a woman could hold, salts idle in her lap, quietly stunned by the plainness of it. To her, you possess an equal share in governing the whole nation, secured by law, unremarkable to you. To you, it's just your vote, one of the ordinary rights of an ordinary life. The political power that belonged in her world only to a narrow slice of propertied men now sits in your hands as fully as in anyone's. And of everything she's seen today, this may be the change that reaches furthest, because it means a woman's opinion on the largest matters there are has finally been declared to count. Now let's discuss your education, which she finds almost too grand to believe. You attended a university, studied advanced subjects alongside men, and earned a formal degree that qualifies you for serious work. In the Regency era, a gentlewoman's education centred on accomplishments meant to attract a husband, music, drawing, a little French, elegant conversation, rather than rigorous academic study. The great universities were firmly closed to women, that you sat examinations, mastered a difficult field, and hold a qualification recognised across the land, tells the Regency lady that the doors she was told to stop knocking on have at long last swung wide open. Let her recall what a gentlewoman's education was aimed at, because it was aimed squarely at marriage. A young lady learned accomplishments, the things that would make her pleasing in a drawing room and desirable as a wife, a little music, enough to play prettily, some drawing, enough to sketch a landscape, a smattering of French, some graceful dancing, the art of light and agreeable conversation. These were meant to display her, to attract a good match, to ornament a household. Deep, rigorous study of difficult subjects was thought unnecessary for a woman, and possibly harmful, and in any case beside the real point, which was to be chosen. You studied to know, not to be chosen. Consider that you studied alongside men, in the same halls, learning the same demanding material. In her world, the great universities were fortresses closed firmly against women, their learning reserved for men who would go on to the professions and the running of the world. A woman was not merely discouraged from that learning, she was barred from the places where it happened. You walked into those places as a matter of course, sat in the same lectures, wrestled with the same difficult ideas, and were examined by the same hard standards. The fortress she was told to stop approaching, you simply entered, and no one at the gate turned you away. Now the degree itself, a formal qualification bearing your name and recognised across the whole country. It isn't a private accomplishment displayed in a parlour. It's a public certification that you mastered a serious field, weighed and stamped by the same authorities that certify men. In her world, a woman had no access to such recognition, no way to have her learning formally acknowledged and made useful in the world. Your degree opens doors, qualifies you for serious work, stands as proof of a trained and capable mind. The accomplishment she gathered could only be shown off. The qualification you earned actually does something. It travels with you into the working world and vouches for you there. And the difficulty of what you mastered is the part she can scarcely absorb. You didn't study something gentle and ornamental. You took on a hard field, one that demanded real effort, real intellect, real persistence through material designed to defeat the unprepared. In her world, women were often thought incapable of such rigour, or too delicate for it, or simply not worth the investment. You met the rigour head-on and prevailed, examinations passed, mastery proven. The notion that a woman's mind was unsuited to serious study has been answered, in your century, by women who study the most serious things there are and excel at them. You are the answer, holding your degree. So she considers you, salts forgotten, a woman who entered the closed fortress of learning, mastered a hard subject alongside men, and walked out with a qualification recognised everywhere. To her, the doors she was told to stop knocking on have swung fully open, and women have simply walked through. To you, it's just your education, the field you chose and worked at and earned. The ornamental accomplishments meant only to catch a husband have given way, in your century, to real learning aimed at real capability. And watching you hold your degree, she thinks of every clever girl in her world taught to sketch and play and charm, and never once allowed to truly know. Let's approach a delicate subject, one she can barely bring herself to name. You speak plainly about your own body, its workings, its needs, its monthly rhythms, out loud, even in company, without lowering your voice or blushing yourself into silence. In the Regency world, such matters were wrapped in heavy discretion, discussed only in whispers among women, if at all, and never acknowledged in polite mixed society. That you treat your own body as an ordinary topic, spoken of with frankness and even humour rather than shame, strikes the Regency lady as either shocking or deeply freeing, and once again she cannot quite decide which. Let her sit with the silence her world wrapped around such things, because it was thick and lifelong. A woman's body, its ordinary workings and needs, was a subject sealed away behind heavy discretion. Its monthly rhythms, its changes, its discomforts were not spoken of aloud, scarcely even among women, and never, ever in mixed company. A lady was meant to manage all of it invisibly, to give no sign, to carry on as though her body did nothing at all. The silence was so complete that a young woman often faced her own body's workings with little preparation and much confusion, because no one would speak of them plainly, even to her. Consider that you speak of these things out loud in ordinary tones, as though they were ordinary, which of course they are. You'll mention a monthly discomfort the way you'd mention a headache. Name a bodily need without lowering your voice. Discuss how your own body works with the plain clarity you'd bring to any other topic. In her world, each of these small frank sentences would have been a scandal, a shocking breach of the discretion that governed a lady's whole relationship to her own flesh. You breach it constantly and casually, and the sky does not fall, and the people around you simply nod, because to them too, it's just an ordinary fact of being a person. Now the mixed company, which multiplies her alarm and then quietly dissolves it. It's one thing she might allow for women to speak of such matters privately among themselves, but you speak of them where men can hear, and the men don't recoil or blush the house down. They receive it as information, ordinary and unremarkable, sometimes offering understanding in return. The heavy wall between what women knew of their own bodies and what could be acknowledged in front of men has simply come down. The knowledge is shared, plain, common to everyone, rather than a shameful secret women carried alone in whispered corners. And the freedom underneath the frankness is what she keeps circling. The silence of her world wasn't only awkward, it was isolating and sometimes dangerous, leaving women uninformed about their own bodies, unable to seek help plainly, alone with confusions and fears they could not name aloud. Your openness undoes all of that. Speaking plainly means understanding plainly, seeking help plainly, meeting your own body with knowledge instead of shame. The frankness she first reads as shocking reveals itself, the longer she watches, as something closer to relief, a woman simply allowed to know and name and speak the truth of the body she lives in. So she watches you speak of your own body without a flicker of shame, salts idle, unable to decide whether to be scandalized or moved. To her, you have shattered a silence her whole world enforced, and done it so easily she can hardly believe the silence held anyone at all. To you, it's just honesty about an ordinary fact of life. The heavy discretion that kept women whispering, uninformed and ashamed, has lifted in your century into plain, unbothered speech. And the more she listens, the more she suspects that the silence she was taught to keep protected no one, and that your frankness, shocking as it first sounded, is the kinder way to live inside a body. Now here's a choice she was rarely offered. You may decide, deliberately and permanently, that you do not want children, and society largely accepts this as your business alone. In the Regency era, producing children, ideally sons, was often regarded as a married woman's central purpose, and a wife who did not bear children faced pity, pressure, and sometimes blame. The idea that a woman might simply prefer a different life, and have that preference respected, was not truly on the table. That you can say no, mean it, and build a full and honoured life anyway, reorders the Regency lady's entire understanding of what a woman is for. Let her recall what childbearing meant to a woman's purpose in her world, because it was often taken to be the whole of it. A wife was expected to produce children, and sons above all, to carry a name and secure a line. This wasn't seen as one path among many, it was understood as the central reason for a woman's married existence. A wife who bore children fulfilled her role. One who did not, whatever the cause, was pitied, pressured, sometimes quietly blamed, as though she had failed at the very task she was made for. The purpose was assigned, not chosen, and a woman was measured against it whether she willed it or not. Consider that you may simply decline, deliberately and for good. Not delay, not struggle and fail, but choose, clearly and permanently, that a life with children is not the life you want. In her world, such a choice was scarcely imaginable, because childbearing was not framed as a choice at all, but as duty and destiny combined. You frame it entirely as a preference, one valid option among others, and you select a different one. The idea that a woman might look at motherhood, understand it fully and decide it isn't for her, without tragedy and without apology, sits far outside anything her world offered. Now the acceptance that meets your choice, which astonishes her as much as the choice itself. You say no, and society by and large treats it as your own affair. There's no chorus of pity, no relentless pressure to reconsider, no verdict of failure hanging over you. Your family may wish otherwise, but the decision is understood to be yours to make. In her world, a childless woman was a problem others felt entitled to comment on, correct, and grieve over. In yours, your reproductive life is regarded as your own business, and a woman who wants a different sort of life is largely allowed to have it, unharried, and the full life you build instead is the part that reorders her deepest sense of what a woman is for. Choosing against children doesn't leave you empty or purposeless. You fill your life with work, with love, with friendship, with travel, with 100 meaningful things, and it is honoured as a whole and worthy life, complete on its own terms. In her world, a woman's worth was bound so tightly to motherhood that a life without it seemed a life unfinished. You demonstrate simply by living well that a woman's purpose is hers to define, and that a full life need not run through the nursery at all. What a woman is for, it turns out, is whatever she decides. So she watches you live a rich and honoured life you chose freely, salts forgotten, absorbing the fact that a woman may decline motherhood and be neither pitied nor diminished. To her, you have refused the one purpose her world assigned to women and lost nothing by refusing it. To you, it's simply the life you wanted, chosen and built and enjoyed. The central duty that once defined a married woman's whole existence has become, in your century, one option among many, freely taken or freely left. And in watching you, she finally sees that a woman was never truly for any single thing, only for the life she chooses to make. And so we come to the last, the one she never dared even to dream about. Should your marriage make you unhappy, you can end it. You can walk away, keep your own name, your own money, your own home, and go on to live a good and respected life afterward. In the Regency world, divorce was staggeringly rare, obtainable in full only through an Act of Parliament, ruinously expensive and catastrophic for a woman's reputation and finances. Most unhappy wives simply endured. That you can leave a bad marriage and thrive rather than vanish into disgrace is the moment the Regency lady finally sets down her smelling salts, looks at you, and wonders, just for a heartbeat, whether she was born in the wrong century after all. Let her recall what a bad marriage meant in her world, because it usually meant a life sentence. Full divorce was so rare as to be nearly mythical, obtainable only through a special Act of Parliament, at a cost few could dream of paying, and shadowed by ruin for any woman it touched. For most wives, An unhappy marriage was simply endured, year upon year with no door out. A cruel husband, a cold one, a reckless one, was a fate to be survived rather than escaped. The vow, once made, closed around a woman for the rest of her life, and the law and the world alike expected her to stay inside it, whatever it cost her. Consider that you can simply end it, and end it cleanly. If your marriage makes you unhappy, you may leave through a process that is available, survivable, and open to ordinary people rather than reserved for the wealthy and desperate. In her world, the door out barely existed and destroyed anyone who forced it. In yours, the door is real, usable, and passed through without catastrophe by countless people who then go on with their lives. That an unhappy wife might have a genuine, dignified way out, rather than only endurance, is a mercy her world withheld from nearly every woman who needed it. Now what you keep on your way out which astonishes her most, you leave with your own name if you wish to reclaim it. You leave with your own money, earned and held in your own account, untouched by the ending. You leave with your own home, or the means to make one, your security intact because it was always yours to begin with. In her world, a woman leaving a marriage, in the vanishingly rare event she could, stood to lose everything, her standing, her means, her very place in the world. You lose none of the essentials because your life was never wholly folded into your husband's. You walk out whole, and the life you build afterward is the part that finally makes her set the salts down for good. You don't vanish into disgrace, whispered about and cast out. You go on, respected, employed, secure, free to love again or not as you choose, your future entirely before you. In her world, a woman touched by divorce was ruined past recovery. In yours, ended a marriage as a hard chapter, not the end of the book, and a woman may close it and write many more. That a woman might survive the ending of a marriage, and more than survive, thrive, is the freedom her world denied most completely of all. So she sets down her smelling salts at last and looks at you fully, a woman who could leave an unhappy marriage and keep her name, her money, her home, and her whole future intact. To her, you hold the one escape her world sealed shut, and you hold it as an ordinary right. To you, it's simply the knowledge that you're never trapped, that a bad marriage is a thing you can survive and leave behind. The life sentence her world handed unhappy wives has become, in your century, a chapter a woman may close and outlive. And in that final freedom she wonders, just for a heartbeat, whether she was born a full 200 years too soon. And so, our Regency lady sits at the edge of your ordinary life, smelling salts finally forgotten in her lap, having watched you do 100 impossible things before dinner. She has seen you sleep alone in a warm and enormous bed, dress yourself in 40 unbothered seconds, walk out into the world with no chaperone and no fear. She has watched you earn your own money and keep it, buy your own home and hold the keys, drive yourself anywhere at any speed, cross the whole world alone for the simple joy of it. She's heard you laugh with your whole chest, curse at furniture, speak plainly of your own body, and vote as though your voice weighed exactly as much as any man's. Which at last it does. She came to be scandalized, and she was. But somewhere between the trousers and the divorce, the scandal quietly turned into something else, something closer to wonder, because everything she guarded her whole life, her pale skin, her careful speech, her spotless supervised reputation, was armor against a world that gave women almost nothing. And you, without ever quite noticing, live in a world that gave women almost everything she was told to stop wanting. So tonight, as you settle into your soft bed, in your own home, behind a door you alone may lock, spare a gentle thought for her, and for every clever corseted woman who spent her one life being watched and married off and told to laugh behind a fan. They endured a world with the doors bolted shut, and somehow they still hoped, still loved, still dreamed of something wider for the daughters who would come after. You are those daughters. The doors are open now. Rest easy and sleep well in the century they could only dream of.